What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Brandon, back with another edition of the Macro Insights podcast. But first, before we get started, a little disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor, and the guest is not giving financial advice. So everything you hear on this podcast is strictly opinion and should not be taken as financial advice. We disclose if we have any holdings discussed in this podcast, and you should not be following us as financial advisors. You should discuss this with professionals before you get involved or invested. And as always, it's not financial advice. So please, please, please take this strictly as our opinions and for entertainment purposes only. Now let's get into the show. What is up, everybody? I'm back with another edition of the Macro Insights podcast. But first, before we get started, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Idaho Armored Vaults. So if you haven't checked them out yet, go to goldsilvervault.com. That's goldsilvervault.com and check them out. Bob Coleman, he runs the whole thing. He founded Idaho Armored Vault in 2008 to help you protect your financial assets and private property outside of the legacy financial system, which includes numerous risks, including systematic and counterparty. This is a unique company that allows you to vertically integrate your structure, procures, transports, stores, and provides extensive liquidity using the physical precious metals. So the precious metals are always kind of a big hot button topic when it comes to inflationary times. Obviously, this is not financial advice or anything like that, but if you're looking for a nice inflation hedge or something else along those lines, be sure to check them out at goldsilvervault.com and tell them Green Candle sent you. And if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on audio, please give this video a like and hit that little bell subscribe button so you get a notification whenever I drop new videos, new content to help the show grow, because it allows me to bring on great guests like I have in the waiting room here. I have the man, the myth, the legend, Phi Cap Investments. Phi, dude, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we've connected through Twitter Spaces, and if you haven't been on his Twitter, you should check it out. It is Phi_CI. Did I get that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, so check him out. He hosts a bunch of spaces. Unfortunately, fortunately, he hosts like a bunch throughout the week and on some great topics. So be sure to pop in and listen to him and some of the great speakers that he brings on. But for those who don't know you, or maybe have heard you on Twitter Spaces and don't really know too much about your background, why don't you tell us, how you kind of decided to start, putting out content like this, and how you got to where you're at today.
Thank you, sir. Basically, I'm not really formally trained in finance or macroeconomics or any of that kind of stuff. That's really a real passion, a real hobby of mine, especially once I started understanding how money worked. But I'm actually trained in engineering. I got my degree in mechanical engineering, specialized in robotics. So for the last 15 years, I've been working my way up basically now to an automation engineer, where basically I've been designing robotics, basically cutting edge down to the micrometer kind of movements, and precision in the medical industry, right? Making all your products, all your medical devices, all the things you see in hospitals, tubes, MRIs, glucose machines, cancer labs, detection labs, all automated. So it's pretty good. Before that, I was in the automotive industry. I was basically designing the robots that move like the sheet metal around in the stamping presses, making your body panels. The hoods, the doors, all the outer stuff. So basically, my robots have basically touched every car out there, every OEM I've made robots for. But really, I started off in the mining industry. I started as a hydraulic designer. Um, my dream entering engineering was like I wanted to design cars, right? That was my dream. That's what kind of fueled me. But once you get into the field, you understand that it's artists that design the cars that envision the cars, and then engineers just have to put it together, right? But in that kind of dream, my first job was designing mining trucks, right? So I was designing all the hydraulics, all the body parts of these mining trucks that go and dig and make conveyors and blow up things and everything to do in mining. And that's kind of where I got my first exposure to like charts, right? Like commodity charts, um, because I could now look at the gold chart and kind of see how my industry would do, right? Would we be busy? Would we be kind of having to go on work share, things like that, right? It was a pretty up and down industry, but it taught me a lot. But yeah, trained as an engineer and I got really interested in finance. I guess as an engineer, you just see the financial system as a big system, and we're pretty good with numbers, so we understand the system. And I was starting to feel it, right? The more I was moving up salary wise, I started paying more and more taxes. I'm like, what's going on here, right? Like it got really bad, and I started asking questions, wondering what the heck I'm doing. Led me down the rabbit hole of like, what is money, and got to understand that. And up here in Canada, it started getting pretty bad with the political situation. But that's kind of how I was led to Bitcoin, and I've been really interested in that lately. But yeah, kind of going on here. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, man, it's awesome because I to speak to another former or fellow engineer because I have that's my background as well. So I kind of
Nice.
resonate with what you're saying there with just like thinking about the systems and kind of that mindset, I guess, the way we kind of are trained, so to speak, to go through problems and just kind of how to think, because I think the legacy education system obviously has like some of its flaws and things like that, but the one thing that really came through with me with engineering, and I'm sure you can resonate with this point as well, is that it's just it helped me not necessarily like learn all right the basics of math or whatever is applied to in whatever specific job it is, but it's also like the systematic approach and the way to kind of view and analyze different things. And that's kind of how I've taken that approach to, macroeconomics and business, finance, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm sure you're kind of, similar to in that respect. And that somewhat resonates with you, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, like the reason I'm obsessed with the markets is I see the whole thing as this system, and it's like the most complex system I've ever encountered. There's so many moving parts, so many gears and ratios, so many interconnected links, and I see the whole thing, right? I see it as a structure, as a machine, and these charts I'm obsessed with, right? I'm basically the charts are my god, right? Like all this news, all this speculation by people, that's just maybe entertainment or it's kind of noise. You have to be careful what becomes a distraction. So for me, like I just trust the charts because I view them as like an output signal from this system, right? Like you're putting probes on a car, right? You're putting probes all over a car to get readouts, right? Or even if you're on a hospital bed, the machines are taking all sorts of readouts. Just like that, I view the charts, the gold chart, the oil chart, the S&P chart, the bond charts, and all the other metrics, right? The treasury metrics, the Fed metrics, M2, all of that stuff, right? GDP. It's like you're reading the readouts of an organism, and if you put it all together, you can kind of see the health of this organism, and you can look at what's going to happen, what it's done in the past, because on the macro scale, you're bounded by certain outcomes. You can't have too much randomness. Maybe you might have it at the micro level, right? We all might seem like we have free will at the micro level, but when you zoom out, we're all stuck in this mathematical pattern. That's just an outcome of nature, right? So, yeah, it's all just kind of trusting the charts as an outcome of nature, because once you understand the patterns in these charts, you come to understand these patterns are everywhere. It's not just in market charts. It's in geological charts. Anything that's natural over time, you see the same patterns. Like even if you track your weight over time, it's like a pattern of struggle and ease, right? Impulse correction. And if you understand how corrections work, all the different types of corrections, you can know how to place trades and profit off of them.
Yeah, for sure. And all that to said is it, these charts and how you analyze it is very interesting. The way you kind of put it is everything's kind of, systematically and kind of has their patterns. But the past couple years have been very interesting. From somebody who's, I mean, I've been in the markets not that long, maybe less than a decade. So you hear people talk about it's an unprecedented time, and you see the giant swings when it came to the COVID crash, the COVID run up, and now we're kind of like floating around. Whether we're in a melt up now or in a recession, everybody's kind of having these big swings. We're seeing the banking crisis kind of go on. So I'll leave it kind of broad for you there. So how do you kind of view the overall macro environment as you're kind of looking at these? Looking at the charts and kind of like seeing a bunch of these, Fed metrics kind of be put out there, like CPI, raising interest rates, the Fed funds rate, all that kind of stuff. So, how do you view what's going on right now?
So like I said before, that charts for me are my god, right? So all this external stuff, all this stuff going on with the Fed, and it's mostly interesting for me. And I try to keep it all in mind, and I try to maybe consider it in my trades or my predictions. But mostly, I go off of wave counts and patterns, and these things are already established. Based on that, we should still be getting a downturn. But if I'm gonna be looking at all the macro, right? Like, um, look at what's going on, right? We have interest rates at like 5.25 now after the last raise, um, and we already see all the banks kind of failing even after the last rate hikes because of mismanagement of risk, right? So that's kind of their fault too, right? They kind of set themselves up for that. But what I'm seeing is there's a consolidation happening up to the big banks. And if you subscribe to like the creature from Jekyll Hyde kind of background to what all of this is, then this is kind of like their mandate for almost a century, right? They were created to mitigate the competition of regional banks, right? So I kind of see like the Fed is just playing out its mandate. It's consolidating regional banks up to the big banks, which are the Fed, right? The big banks are the Fed, right? Like, people need to understand that. It was a cartel of bankers that came together and established a Federal Reserve, right? They have stakeholders, and the deeds are held, or the shares are held by, you know, various banks. So people need to understand that. You see that building in Washington, it's not like it's just a representation, but it's actually a conglomeration of banks. The whole world works as a cartel. You have cartels in banking, you have cartels in army. Everything's about cartels. Everything's about who's going to give you protection, who you're going to side with. There's always a big dog in the room. So people need to understand the world is not run by angels. Nothing's fair. We're seeing big sharks eating up like the little fish. It's just nature, and it's just happening. And we're gonna see like people going into the big banks too, because they're gonna be like, what the heck? Janet Yellen's only gonna insure these depositors, right, up to max. So we're just gonna go there. So we're just gonna see people get flushed into the big banks. That's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and it's interesting coming from your perspective because in the US, there's four big players, right? Where in Canada, what seems to be playing out in the US has already kind of happened in Canada, where there's kind of like six major banks. And so, from your perspective as somebody who lives in Canada, what do you, I guess, see some problems with that, where we're kind of like consolidating into a bunch of large players, opposed to, maybe having a bunch of small regional banks?
Well, they get a monopoly on interest rates and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm not too into the Canadian system. It's kind of irrelevant up here, but yeah, you've seen a consolidation into the big banks. All they do is shuffle around their accounts, their debts, their money. All they just shuffle it around, right? And they just profit from that. They're all connected. There's no competition, right? They're all in on it together. Um, but yeah, it's not an interesting story up here. I'm more interested in the country that's going to rug pull the entire world.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense, but just from my perspective, just seeing like what it is, what I guess the U.S. values have kind of stood on for a long time is that it's small business. Like 50% of the small jobs are the jobs here in the U.S. come from small businesses.
It's
Startups.
mostly property rights and the judicial system, right? The fact that everything runs on contracts and law in the U.S. and that's what everyone kind of um, sees as the strength, right? Like you can actually take people to court and get things done, right? Or you can
Yeah,
actually have
that's a fair
property
point
rights,
too. Like
right?
the
So
judicial
so
system here is very strong. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
and based on that, we have like a great productivity, right, in U.S. So that's kind of what everyone sees as like the strength of the U.S. and why the dollar gets the strength. There's also like military enforcement, protection, right, offering protection, all the bases around the world, right. That's all backing up the U.S. dollar, and what gives people confidence to continue using it.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like the dollar is showing some weakness, at least from my perspective. Obviously, you're a Bitcoin guy, but there's like all other currencies and everything else kind of in the global system, right? So right now we're on like a fiat, system, so to speak, and so because we're on that, it seems like there's some players kind of vying for power, right? I mean, we've had obviously the Russia Ukraine conflict. China potentially. Invading Taiwan and running and capturing all the semiconductors and all that kind of stuff. Like, I guess how do you got I guess see all this playing out, because it seems like it can be a lot of I guess doom and gloom in the end, with the Fed kind of pulling these strings and raising the interest rates, but it seems like they're upsetting, everybody kind of globally. So I maybe I'll go into my prediction a little bit after this, but after you go through. But I'd like to hear what you think, like how this whole situation plays out.
The more I've been looking into this, the more it just becomes funny. Um, the whole world is pegged onto the U.S. dollar, right? These countries can, make a fuss and say they're going to make their own group and start their own currency, but they have nothing to back. They're all pegged to the U.S. dollar still, right? All contracts are still denominated in U.S. dollars. Everything's still done in US dollars. Everyone's still holding US dollar reserves. Even when they do transactions in whatever other currencies, they then exchange it for dollars, right? Like come on, right? You need the consumerism of the US for all these other countries to ship out their exports and make money, right? Um, they're not gonna screw with the US at this point. And yeah, the U.S. is through NATO is now waging war with Russia, right? With Ukraine being the center ground for that battle. They're trying to establish, their force there, but at the same time, I don't think they can afford a secondary front on the Chinese side. So we see TSMC now. I guess moving assets out, I guess, and they're building. factories were in Arizona and Ohio, I think it is. So we already see what's called a de-risking, right? Um, I've heard this around Twitter Spaces. It's a nice word, de-risking. So I think they're just going to get their assets out, and they're just going to honor the one China policy. I don't think there's going to be an invasion of Taiwan, right? Taiwan is China in China's eyes and on policy, right? Global policy. Um, I don't. Why else would uh, America fight for it if they have their assets out, all their silicon, all their production, all that foundry, all that stuff out, the expertise maybe. Like what else would U.S. need Taiwan for, right? So that's kind of my take. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like everything is kind of has some sort of chip in it these days, right? I mean, we got and they're the number one exporter with like Taiwan Semiconductors. Apple, just had their earnings the other day. It's like one of the biggest companies in the US. They get all their
This
things
is
for their
why
iPhone.
this is why the U.S. is understanding now. Like certain production has to be done in house, domestic, right? As a matter of um, security. So once we get all that stuff back in house, like we'll be a bit more independent or a bit more able to flex, right? Because other countries won't be able to um, twist our arm, right? I say our as a Canadian, but like it's all just America anyway. Um, but yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like that's what all these countries are learning now. Yeah, we had this fantasy about globalism, right? Everyone's just going to be helping each other out, but then politics doesn't always lend for that. So some things you have to onshore and protect as a sovereign security independence kind of thing, right? And one of that is now chip manufacturing. What else does Taiwan have going for it if we onshore that stuff, right?
Yeah, no, that's true 100%. And it's not only just that, right? I mean, it's been kind of like this movement with, the green energy policies as far as like, oil and gas reserves go. We're kind of seeing the effects of that in that industry as well. Where, the US could be self-sustained if it just loosened up those green energy policies and decided to mine off of California. The entire state of California is really suffering. I think that the gas there is over $5 a gallon, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's over 350 here in Florida, and generally speaking, it's usually significantly cheaper over here than it is over there. Um,
But the consumer is still taking it, right? They're still taking it. I think at this point, they think that we can still kind of, you know, um, put tighten the noose on the neck a little bit and still be able to operate. That's what kind of Jerome Powell is doing. Like how much can I raise before like there's a pain point for everyone, right? Right now, people haven't reached the pain point. I just read I just read a tweet the other day that restaurants are going up, right? Travel's going up. Like, where's the pain in people, right? We do see people falling off the socioeconomic ladder. There's more people going homeless. We do see that, and we're gonna see more people struggling when, especially up here in Canada, with our 5-year mortgage terms. Um, when they have to renew to these higher rates, they've been enjoying maybe 2%, 1%. But when that 5-year period comes, it's going to be like 5% or more, or 8%. So that's going to be a crazy increase to their whatever they were paying. Maybe they weren't ready for that. Maybe they weren't structured for that. It might take them out. They might have to become renters, or they might have to take these crazy 30-year amortizations where you're just pushing the interest out for like your whole life, and you're basically a renter to the bank. Some crazy stuff going on up here, man.
Yeah, I mean, to say the least. So, I'll give you another tough question here. Like, what do you think of the job that Jerome Powell is doing? Because you're seeing him raise rates. You're seeing all these bank kind of failures, seemingly because of the raise of rates at the pace that he's been doing. But he is, I guess a Volcker disciple, and his mantra has been higher for longer for, since he essentially started raising rates at the, what was it, like not even a year ago at this point. So I'll leave it at that. After this 25 basis point hike, how do you think of the job that he's doing, and where do you think he's going from here?
All right, so I'm just going to step back a bit. So he's basically responding to a situation, right, that was created by Congress. That was all that um, money printing or whatever increase in the monetary supply that happened during COVID. We're seeing the effects of that as inflation now, right? So I think he kind of responded late. Like I saw this coming. So like I consider myself a basement economist. If a basement economist and a lot of others saw this coming, why didn't he? Like why was he calling it transitory? Why wasn't he already raising rates then? Right? Like that's what we're pissed about, that he didn't start raising rates sooner. Because I don't know at this point. I have some reservations. Um, but yeah, I think he's responding to an external stimuli. His mandate is 2%. And honestly, he has to get there sooner than later because there is this effect of a change in people's behavior. If they think that inflation is going to be higher, they're going to start changing their practices, jacking up their prices. Like it's the expectation of a higher inflation rate will basically create it, right? People will kind of price it in, right? So you can manifest inflation like that too. So he's trying to get it down to 2% as fast as he can. Like I said, he should have started faster, but I think he's trying to get there because otherwise we're going to have a higher inflationary regime, right? Maybe we have to start getting used to a 3% inflation rate, 4% inflation rate, and that's not going to be ideal, right? Especially when you're dealing with fiat. But yeah, he's said multiple times, I need to get to 2%. That's my mandate. When um, Elizabeth Warren talked to him, he said, nope, yeah, people are going to lose their jobs. I think when this whole banking situation started, it kind of helped, right? Because it is deflationary. I think he might be standing back and just watching what happens because he needs this to happen, right? He needs um, this to happen for the 2% mandate. But I think he still needs to push higher because the real rate is way worse than what it's being reported as. Like you can see it in housing, you can see it in everything, right? Um, so yeah, that's kind of my take on it. He has to get there, and he's just responding. We haven't even dealt with like all this Ukraine spending yet, so there's another like ticking time bomb waiting for us around the corner. Like how much spending? Like you guys are about to hit a debt ceiling, right? But they keep coming up with money for Ukraine. This whole debt ceiling thing is just a funny game, right? They always raise it. They're not going to let the U.S. default because if they let the U.S. default, then now people are going to be like, "What the hell?" Like they're going to lose confidence, unless that's what they want, right? They want people to lose confidence in U.S. dollars, right? They can't allow that optics to get out, right? They have to know that the U.S. can pay their bills. If the U.S. defaults, then everyone's gonna then that could be really bad for the dollar, right? As a perception.
Well, I mean, even Jerome Powell, like from that perspective, he answered that question on whenever I think it was on Wednesday when the FOMC meeting was. They asked about that, and he's like, "The U.S. will never not pay its bills." But what does that even mean when they keep raising the debt ceiling, as you said? Like, I don't know. From my perspective, it doesn't even.
There is no debt ceiling, my friend.
Yeah,
There is not.
exactly. I was just about to say that. Like there can't be a debt ceiling if, hey, the bills come due and like, all right, or the tax man or something, or Phi, I don't know if you own a house, but if the first of the month is coming up and you can't pay the full mortgage, so you pay, I don't know, a small percentage of it, and you're just like, all right, we'll just tack it on to the next month.
But see,
Like,
these rate raises are hurting the government too, right? Because they have to pay more interest on the debt, right? And then they're going to have to start offering higher rates on bonds, to attract buyers. So they're just going to keep rolling over bonds to pay off the debt. The debt's just going to go to infinity. Um, it's just an ever sliding mechanism, right? It just moves forward and just creates more inflation and just erodes the U.S. dollar as it goes, right? Um, I don't know if you want to get into the whole CBDC discussion, but we can save that. Um,
yeah, I mean, we can jump right into that if you want, because it seems like that might be their kind of escape lever. So, how do first let's rewind it here. Set the stage for the audience. Like, what is a CBDC, and like, how do you kind of see this all playing out?
a CBDC is like a central bank digital currency. It's basically a token that's issued by the Federal Reserve. You'll have a direct account with the Federal Reserve, and it'll be issued by them. Basically, it's programmable money, so you can set so many parameters, like whatever you can think of. Obviously, it's not going to be the user that's going to be setting those rules; it's going to be the issuer. So you can just imagine, well, like how much chaos that's going to create if they can just control your money programmably, right? Programmatically. They can set expiry dates. They can set, when you can use it, where you can use it, anything you can think of. They'll probably do it. The way I think they're gonna kind of roll it in is we're seeing a rise in automation and robotics, and I'm part of that. So what's going to happen over time as these things get better? Robotics and AI are basically going to uh, take over all manufacturing production. Maybe 80%, 90%. You'll need a skeleton crew of people to maintain all this stuff, but majority wise, you're going to have AI and robotics just taking over all the production. So what's that going to do? It's going to kick people out of a job, most people out of a job, but you still need a consumer, right? You still need a consumer. Otherwise, how do you maintain your reserve currency? So what are you going to do? You're going to issue a universal basic income to provide like a base liquidity, base consumerism, right? For all these products that are now so cheap. I think this will be the age of abundance, right? But you still need consumers, right? So that's how they're gonna introduce the CBDC, right? Here, take like 500,000 of these tokens, and they might even like say, your bills and your coins are no longer legal tender. You have a couple months to exchange it for CBDCs, right? So that's another way they can funnel people in. So CBDCs are inevitable. It's going to happen. Most people are going to get flushed into it. Most people don't even understand the current monetary system. So I don't have any hope of them understanding it before they get into CBDCs. They're going to push it as like this new technological improvement. Oh, look, your money is now like digital. Oh, your money's so cool, right? Like it's they're gonna you saw that like TikTok video of that like Chinese girl pushing like the thing in her arm that you can pay with, right? So they're gonna do conjunction with that with digital IDs. They're gonna just push it as this technological revolution. Oh, look, you can go around, access everything with this thing in your hand, pay for everything with this thing in your hand, and you're just gonna have mass consumerism while the robots and AI take over GDP.
Yeah, man, it kind of sounds like the plot to iRobot, essentially. I mean, but I mean, it's all true. It's very scary stuff. And it's already kind of being rolled out in a lot of countries. I know China has had this test pilot, And the U.S. is theoretically, or is like kind of come out and said that they're rolling this out.
There's a great website, cbdctracker.org. It literally is a live map of all the countries and what stage they're at, right, with their CBDC program. Even lists the project names and like the official names, so you can like look them up. And it's like over 90% of the countries are at some phase of a CBDC research or getting close to rolling it out. It's an interesting live map. Check it out, cbdctracker.org.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. And that is, yeah, to me, I don't know. This might sound extreme, but it's almost to me, it seems like it's a form of slavery where it's like, CBDC is going to, you can limit your money based on what you do, what you say, all that stuff. Like they're essentially like have the ability then to take away your freedom. And not only that, we move into fully electric cars. Now you have like a
They
stopper.
won't take away our freedom. We'll give it to them, right? People will beg for this stuff, right? People always beg for their destruction. If you look into history, um, they're going to demand it, right? They're going to demand CBDCs. We need this, right? Especially maybe with inflation. And if we want to talk about Bitcoin, right? This is what I'm kind of worried about. We're seeing all these bank runs happening, right? And soon people might just lose faith altogether in the US dollar. If there's ever a scenario like that, we I don't know if the Lightning Network is ready for that huge influx of new users, right? So the infrastructure still needs to expand like a lot. So that's one of my worries, right? If we're gonna have to onboard all these people, right? All these people who've lost faith in the US dollar. If we're really going to be that substitute, if we're really going to take over as that base liquidity of value for the world, like we need more people working on this. We need more people running Lightning nodes. We need a bigger network um, to take it all on. So that's just one of my concerns at this point, right? Because we're kind of like taking it laissez-faire, right? Oh yeah, let's go to like conferences and meet up and like, oh, let's just orange pill like our aunts and aunties and whatever. But the CBDC thing, the Fed takeover, it's like happening as you sleep. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you there. Like, I am worried about it, and I think more people need to wake up to the fact that CBDCs and other things like that, are obviously very, 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 very bad, and people need to understand like what is going on, what could be the potential negatives of this, and this obviously like shows like this and talking about it is what can kind of help, bring that awareness, but you know. I do think that, although there's a lot of bank failures, there's going to have to be a Fed pivot at some point in time. And so I was actually talking about this. I have a group chat. Everybody on my that listens to my Bitcoin show probably knows that, but I have one with the Canadian Bitcoiners and some other people. But there's over 4,200 banks right now still in the U.S. And if there was two failures a day, this is coming from Len, the BTC price bot. So I appreciate it, Len. Shout out to Len. That number can remain. You could essentially have two banks fail a day, and still have the banking system around for another 5.7 years, maybe even longer. Because of banking holidays and other things like that too. So to me, I see the contagion, and three of the biggest of the four biggest bank failures have been within the past like 2 months, I think, or 3 months, whatever, past quarter, for just ease of use of this number. So I mean, obviously there's a big banking issue and other things like that, but the current financial system, I don't think is going to go down without a fight. And I think like, whatever side of the coin you're on, you shouldn't be rooting for it to kind of collapse like it is, because, in a sense, I think I agree with you. Like some people will start to go towards CBDCs, but, you know, you also see like a super kind of, I guess left leaning country in Canada start to adopt things like Bitcoin and other things like that to kind of help with the privacy when it comes to just like the Canadian truckers convoy and all that kind of stuff that's been going on. So, to me, I think the US is a very strong country, but what I'm hearing is that the US is also trying to implement the CBDCs by bringing them into like central banking, or not central banking, bringing them into the like regional banks and other things like that, but having those banks be the quote unquote wallets. So they're still going to have kind of the ruse as, hey, you still have your bank accounts and whatever, like your Capital One, your Chase, your Wells Fargo, like all the big players. But you have to go through these guys in order to spend your money. But it's also the Fed Now coin or whatever it is. So I think that they could be working on a transition where that if you have to use like this bank account to pay your bills or do whatever, and essentially they could indirectly just start to do that and you don't even know that it's being rolled out, which is kind of the scary part to me. Is like everything is so digital now. All your data is stored by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, whoever you swipe your card with. And essentially after that, your bank knows everything you spend your money on. And soon enough, with a tinfoil hat time with all these Ring cameras and the voice activated whatever listening things, I mean, it's essentially like you could theoretically be monitored at all points in time.
Oh yeah, all expectation of privacy died a long time ago. We're on camera 24/7. We're on speaker 24/7. My phone's spying on other people. Their phones are spying on me. Like it's all interconnected. And now with like 5G, all your appliances can talk to each other. Like privacy's dead, right? Even if you take good precautions, VPNs, Tor, all of that stuff, they have ways to redirect your packets and see what you're doing, right? So like don't really rely or have any expectation of privacy. If you're using their devices, like you're basically opting in to their world, you're giving them permission to do all these things. It's their devices. Yeah, you're paying for it, but you didn't design it. You don't know what chips are in there. You don't know what's going on. I got a Google Home staring at me right now. It's probably listening to everything. It's sending everything to Google. But yeah, we cannot have any expectation of privacy in this day and age. Um, CBDCs are coming. Even Bitcoiners are going to have CBDC accounts. Everyone's going to have it. It's just going to be the thing. But on the side, you better have this parallel economy set up for people that want to get out, right? Have an option to transact outside of the system. It's all about giving yourself options, right? At the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and it's about, essentially like, it's essentially about capitalism, right? The way that it's supposed to play out theoretically is like, a proper business is going to be able to set the prices of things, and, consumers kind of dictate that in a sense where, if you're selling ice cream for $20 a cone, like nobody's going to buy that, because it's just not worth the $20, so to speak. So you got to
These things work on paper, man. But at the end of the day, there's always this human nature. There's the people that are more inclined or more acclimated for this kind of thing. They're more dominant. Um, they're more they're different, right? And they're able to basically become the people who oversee these systems that have been created that allowed for people like them to rise and get up there, right? So we always have to consider human nature. I don't think there's any system in the world that runs like it's supposed to on paper. You always have these top gangsters, you know, kind of overseeing everyone else. They set the prices, they set the rules. You see it on every level. You see it from like the streets, like maybe the restaurant cartel. In up here in Canada or Toronto, we had tow truck cartel wars, right? Like they were like, oh, you can't pick up cars from our No, you're picking up, like, people were burning tow trucks, right? So there's a tow truck cartel at that level. You have cartels in the political level. You have cartels in the banking, in the energy, on the global level, right? Like, it's all cartels. It's just cartels. It's all big dogs and little fish, right? That's just how things work out. That's just how nature works. How maybe humanity works. You're not going to be able to iron that out even on a Bitcoin standard. You'll make it less easy for them to operate, but we'll see how that plays out, right? Um, I'm kind of interested in Bitcoin because it is set on code, on rules, and it is set on, like, let me just grab a drink here. It is you know you have everyone looking at the code. You can see it. There's nothing that can be hidden. Everyone has to agree to running that, and everyone has to agree to store their value in it. There's incentives on all levels, keeping this thing, something run by the people for the people, right? Everyone that transacts in it values it, and should be running a node at a minimum. Maybe if they can mine, that would be awesome. So they kind of have a skin in the game, in protecting the system for everyone that's also protecting their value. It's kind of cool, um, especially when I was learning about the money system and up here in Canada what was going on. It was all doom and gloom. And then my buddy was like, "You got to watch the Breed Love and Michael Saylor series." And they spoke to me like an engineer, right? Like joules, watts, energy, like hardware. Like, they spoke my language, and it just clicked right away. I was like, "Oh my god!" So the solution's already here. So that kind of like cleared up the gray clouds, and I started getting really excited by it. Of course, I went into all the altcoining. I was still figuring it out, right? Like, we have Ethereum, we have Cardano, all this stuff. I went through it all. I learned about all of it. A DeFi, Pancake Swap, all Uniswap, all that stuff, just to learn about it, right? And then you get to the realization that, like, okay, like, Bitcoin's different. This thing's actually just humming on its own pace at its own pulse, and it's got nothing to do with all this other stuff. Like, I gotta focus on this thing, right? This is actually, like, all this other stuff is just fun and games. This thing's actually like solving a humanitarian issue, right? All this fiat domination that's happening in the world, um, just raping everybody's value over time, like this, and not having access to commerce, right, through the current system. This is going to change everything, right? For me, Bitcoin, I'm so excited to live in these times. Like Bitcoin, we have AI, we have advancements in nuclear. These are the three things I'm so excited about right now: Bitcoin, AI, and nuclear energy. Um, I'm really positioning myself in those areas. I'm still positioned in things like energy, like traditional energy, because I don't think oil's going anywhere. It might get cheaper over time, right? As we don't rely it as energy anymore, right? More just for products like plastics. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Plastics. Um, so there'll still be a base demand for crude, but as we move away, transition to like nuclear, like energy will be so cheap. We don't need to burn oil for energy. We can just use it for products, and maybe the commercial stuff, right? Like diesel, jet fuel, um, unless we come up with like electric planes and things like that. But um, even you still have to understand, if you go all electric, you still have to consider where the energy for the electricity comes from, right? Like, it has to be nuclear or hydro. If you really want to consider green, if it comes from diesel burning or wood burning, then it doesn't matter how you charge your Tesla, it's not green. um, but yeah, those are the three things I'm now so excited about. And obviously AI includes like robotics and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely seems like there's going to be an ever changing time, especially like here in the next I don't know, 5 years. It seems like everything's moving so quickly, but you've been very generous with your time, helping me coming in here and speaking with me about all these various topics. And I think, this made for a great conversation. And so I'll have to have you back on in the future or pop into spaces or whatnot. But for those who maybe missed or tuned out a little bit at the beginning, and missed where they can find you, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you and what you got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at sign PHI underscore CI. So at Phi underscore CI. Mostly I'm just tweeting headlines, just important, world events or monetary events. Sometimes I'm putting up like memes and just funny things, music, whatever, but mostly about that kind of stuff. And yeah, and once in a while I host Twitter Spaces. It's kind of cool how that grew, meeting all sorts of people like working with you, seeing what you're doing, all the people you're having on. It's just great to see. Like I feel like I found my community, right? And somehow I'm able to like be with the Bitcoin community, the macro community, the spiritual community, all sorts of communities, right? And I feel like my spaces are like where all those people come together. They wouldn't normally congregate together, right? But somehow they're all congregating in my spaces, and I love the debates that come out of that. Um, um, People go out with understandings that they might not have had when they came in. I try to keep things peaceful. Sometimes I let people just go. People need to vent. People need to get their frustrations out. Sometimes you get really good conversations out of that, debates, but mostly I like to keep it respectful, and we get really good content. We get really good alpha. Nothing's planned. I don't schedule them. I just drop, when I want to talk about something, and people show up. It's wild. Twitter, my friend, about a year and I think it's a year and a half ago. I think I started in November 2021, maybe really seriously. He's like, "Fine, you got to get on Twitter. That's where all your people are." And I got on there, and yeah, started meeting people, started having conversations. One of my good friends that I made there was DJ Satoshi. It was his spaces that really, he's the one that kind of encouraged me to start speaking more. And from there, I started getting encouraged to host with other people. And from there, just branched off to kind of like the solo thing. I like to bring random co-hosts that want to try out new things, right? Like there's a lot of people that have co-hosted on my space, and then they are now hosts, right? So that's like what I like to see. I like to identify people that can communicate, can speak. I don't feel like I have to monopolize spaces or be at the top or be the number one. Like I like what Drake did, right? Like he was like the number one rapper, but he started bringing up others, right? He started building a whole community of rappers and industry, and built a whole damn industry around it. So that's what we gotta do, right? Like we gotta someone sparked something in us, right? So we gotta find others who have that spark too, that potential, and inspire them, get them to come up and talk, get them to maybe flesh out their ideas and do their own thing, right? That's what we're seeing now, because we can't do this all on our own, right? I don't really care about credit for my ideas as long as the ideas get out there, right? That's what's important, right? Like real change makers don't really take credit. Like you see all these elite people, they're working in the background. You don't know their names, right? But they're influencing the whole world. So you got to kind of like look at it that way. Just talk to people. Like even your thesis, my thesis is just built upon like everybody that we talk to, right? So our ideas are representative of everyone else, right? So it's in everyone's best favor to bring out their best ideas, so that's what we're going to propagate to everyone else, right? So I feel like that's kind of like a responsibility. There's no real financial education going on, so these spaces is where it's going on. It's like the cutting edge conversations, and people need to be here. Um, for the amount of daily users on Twitter, there's like nobody on Spaces, and that needs to change. People need to become more aware, and we're the ones that are going to have to do this work. I feel like we're the generation of sacrifice. We're the ones that are going to have to do this for the next generation, right? If we don't do it, then all hope is lost, right? Then all the other generations are just going to be born into slavery, CBDCs, and they're just going to think this is how the world works. They're not going to know what we lived. Um, right? So it's going to have to be us. We have to give them an option, and maybe in our lifetime we'll see it kind of take over the world. Who knows? Maybe not. But we got to start something, right? But thank you for having me here, man. I enjoyed this. Didn't really plan anything. I'm just talking off the top of my head, and this is kind of cool.
Yeah, man, it was awesome stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on. Everybody go check out Phi on Twitter and join some of his spaces. I know you got some open mic stuff and all that kind of stuff. So you have the opportunity to go up and speak on his and not only on mine, but his as well. So Phi, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, man.